Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stepped off the transport truck at Camp Pendleton. The California sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty training ground where dozens of Marines were preparing for advanced marksmanship training. At 24, Sarah had already proven herself in basic training, but this was different. This was the elite precision marksman school, where only the best of the best earned their place. The other recruits barely glanced her way as she shouldered her gear bag. Most were seasoned Marines with years of combat experience under their belts. Sarah, on the other hand, was fresh from her first deployment, where she had served primarily in logistics and support roles. Her request for sniper training had raised eyebrows throughout her chain of command. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, the head instructor, called the group to attention. His weathered face showed the wear of multiple deployments, and his voice carried the authority of someone who had seen real combat. As he began the introductory briefing, his eyes scanned the assembled Marines before settling on Sarah. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the most challenging marksmanship program in the United States military," Rodriguez announced. "Over the next 12 weeks, we will push you beyond your limits. Many of you will fail. Some of you shouldn't even be here." The comment stung, though Rodriguez hadn't addressed her directly. Sarah had heard variations of this sentiment throughout her military career. Growing up in a small town in New Mexico, she had learned to shoot on her grandfather's ranch, picking off coyotes that threatened the livestock from distances that amazed the local ranchers. But military culture was different, and old attitudes died hard. During the equipment issue phase, Sarah noticed the skeptical glances from her fellow trainees. Corporal Jenkins, a burly Marine from Texas, made no effort to hide his disdain. "What's the Corps thinking, sending support personnel to sniper school?" he muttered to his buddy. "This ain't no place for diversity checkboxes." Sarah had heard worse. In her previous unit, she had endured constant questions about her capabilities, her motivations, and her place in the military hierarchy. When she had requested transfer to a combat role, her commanding officer had suggested she might be more suited to military police or intelligence work. The implication was clear: direct combat roles, especially specialized ones like precision marksmanship, were not for people like her. The first week focused on basic rifle fundamentals, even though all the students were already qualified marksmen. Sarah quickly distinguished herself during the preliminary shooting exercises. While others struggled with the transition to the more sophisticated equipment, she adapted smoothly to the advanced optics and ballistics calculations required for long-range shooting. Her success in these early exercises only seemed to intensify the skepticism around her. During evening study sessions, she overheard conversations about how the instructors were probably going easy on her, or how she was getting special treatment. The comments followed a familiar pattern she had experienced throughout her career. Any success was attributed to lowered standards rather than genuine ability. Master Gunnery Sergeant Thompson, a legendary figure in Marine Corps marksmanship circles, observed the dynamics among the students with interest. He had seen talented shooters from all backgrounds, and he recognized something special in Sarah's approach to the fundamentals. Her technique was unconventional in some ways, drawing from civilian hunting experience rather than purely military training, but it was effective. During one particularly challenging exercise involving moving targets at 800 yards, Sarah consistently outperformed her peers. The targets were designed to simulate real-world scenarios where split-second timing made the difference between mission success and failure. While other students struggled with the complex wind calculations and target prediction, Sarah seemed to have an intuitive grasp of the variables involved. Jenkins and his group of supporters became increasingly vocal in their criticism. They questioned whether the scoring system was accurate, whether the targets were properly calibrated, and whether the instructors were maintaining consistent standards. The atmosphere grew tense as Sarah continued to excel in areas where they expected her to fail. The turning point came during a night shooting exercise in the third week. The students were required to engage targets at various distances in complete darkness, using only night vision equipment and infrared lasers. This type of shooting required not only technical skill, but also the ability to remain calm under pressure and adapt to rapidly changing conditions. As the exercise began, several students struggled with the unfamiliar equipment and the stress of performing in darkness. The instructors had designed the scenario to be particularly challenging, incorporating simulated combat conditions with time pressure and multiple target priorities. Sarah approached the exercise with the same methodical precision she had shown in daylight shooting. Her performance that night was exceptional. She engaged all assigned targets within the time limit, achieving scores that exceeded the minimum requirements by a significant margin. More importantly, she demonstrated the kind of tactical thinking that distinguished truly effective snipers from merely accurate shooters. She identified priority targets, managed her ammunition carefully, and maintained situational awareness throughout the exercise. The other students watched in stunned silence as the instructors announced her scores. For the first time since arriving at the school, the criticism and skeptical comments stopped. Even Jenkins had difficulty arguing with the objective results displayed on the electronic scoring system. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez pulled Sarah aside after the exercise. His expression was unreadable as he reviewed her performance data. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked. The question wasn't accusatory. It carried genuine curiosity about her background and training. Sarah explained her childhood on her grandfather's ranch, where necessity had taught her to make every shot count. Ammunition was expensive, and missing meant coyotes would continue threatening the livestock. She had learned to read wind patterns by watching grass and dust, to judge distances by studying the landscape, and to remain patient even when time seemed critical. Rodriguez nodded slowly. He had seen similar skills in Marines who grew up hunting, but Sarah's combination of natural ability and intense focus was unusual. He made a note in her file that would prove significant in the weeks to come. As the first phase of training concluded, Sarah had established herself as one of the top performers in her class. The initial skepticism hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had given way to grudging respect from some quarters and continued resentment from others. The real challenges lay ahead, as the training would become progressively more difficult and the standards more demanding. Unknown to Sarah and her fellow students, the instructors were already planning the most challenging phase of their training. The advanced long-range shooting module would push everyone to their absolute limits, testing not only their technical skills, but also their mental fortitude and ability to perform under extreme pressure. This phase would separate the truly exceptional marksmen from the merely competent ones. The stage was set for Sarah to prove that the early skepticism about her abilities was not only unfounded but tragically misguided. The upcoming challenges would reveal capabilities that even she didn't fully understand, setting in motion events that would ultimately lead to one of the most extraordinary shooting achievements in military history. The fourth week of training brought Sarah face to face with the most intimidating challenge yet: extreme long-range shooting. The class moved to a specialized facility in the desert where distances stretched beyond anything they had encountered before. The targets now sat at ranges exceeding 1,500 yards, where factors like the Earth's rotation and atmospheric conditions became critical variables in every shot. Master Gunnery Sergeant Thompson took personal charge of this phase of training. His reputation was legendary throughout the Marine Corps, with confirmed kills at distances that seemed impossible to younger Marines. He had trained some of the most successful snipers in recent military history, and his standards were notoriously unforgiving. Thompson gathered the remaining 16 students around a large table covered with ballistics charts, weather monitoring equipment, and advanced rifle systems. The initial class of 24 had already lost 8 members who couldn't meet the increasingly demanding requirements. Those who remained represented the cream of Marine Corps marksmanship talent. "This is where we separate the marksmen from the true precision shooters," Thompson announced, his gravelly voice cutting through the desert wind. "At these distances, everything matters. The humidity, the barometric pressure, the temperature differential between you and the target. Miss any of these factors, and your bullet will be off by feet, not inches." Sarah studied the equipment with intense concentration. The rifles were custom-built platforms designed specifically for extreme long-range work, featuring barrel systems and optics that cost more than most people's cars. The scopes alone required extensive training to operate effectively, with multiple adjustment systems for windage, elevation, and parallax correction. The first exercise involved targets at 1,200 yards, a distance that would challenge even experienced snipers. Students had to calculate their own firing solutions using meteorological data, range estimates, and ballistic software. No assistance was provided beyond the basic tools and reference materials. As the other students struggled with the complex calculations, Sarah found herself drawing on knowledge she had acquired years earlier. Her grandfather had been more than just a rancher. He was a former military instructor who had served in Vietnam. He had taught her not just to shoot, but to understand the science behind long-range precision. Those lessons, combined with her natural mathematical aptitude, gave her an edge that became apparent as the exercise progressed. While Jenkins and several others fired multiple rounds trying to find their targets, Sarah's first shot struck within inches of center mass. Her second shot, adjusted for the slight wind shift she had observed, was a perfect center hit. Thompson raised an eyebrow as he observed her targets through binoculars, but made no comment. The exercises grew progressively more challenging throughout the week. Students faced targets at varying elevations, shooting positions that stressed their bodies and equipment, and time constraints that simulated combat conditions. Sarah continued to excel, but her success was beginning to create problems within the group. The tension came to a head during a particularly difficult exercise involving multiple targets at different ranges. Students had to engage 5 targets in sequence, with each requiring different calculations and adjustments. The scenario was designed to test their ability to rapidly shift between different firing solutions while maintaining accuracy under pressure. Sarah approached the exercise with methodical precision, taking time to properly calculate each shot while maintaining awareness of the time constraints. Her performance was flawless. 5 targets, 5 hits, all within the designated scoring zones. The electronic timing system showed she had completed the course well within the allowed time limit. Jenkins, who had struggled throughout the exercise and failed to hit 3 of his 5 targets, finally exploded. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. There's no way someone with her background is consistently outperforming Marines with years of combat experience. Something's not right here. His accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Several other students who had been struggling with the advanced material nodded in agreement. The implication was clear. Sarah's success must be the result of some form of assistance or favoritism rather than genuine ability. Master Gunnery Sergeant Thompson stepped forward, his expression deadly serious. "Corporal Jenkins, are you suggesting that my instructors are compromising the integrity of this program?" Jenkins backpedaled quickly, realizing he had crossed a line. "No, Master Guns, I'm not saying that. I just think there might be some factors we're not considering." Thompson's response was swift and definitive. "The only factor you need to consider is that Marie Martinez is outperforming you because she's better prepared and more focused than you are. If you spend half as much energy improving your shooting as you do questioning hers, you might still have a chance of graduating this program." The rebuke stung, but it also clarified the situation for everyone present. Sarah's abilities were real, documented, and undeniable. The instructors had been watching her progress with growing interest, recognizing that they might be witnessing the development of a truly exceptional marksman. That evening, Thompson called Sarah to his office. The space was sparse but filled with memorabilia from decades of military service. Commendation certificates, photographs with various military units, and several rifles that had obviously seen combat use. He gestured for her to sit across from his desk. "Martinez, I've been doing this for 23 years, he began, studying her with the intense gaze that had intimidated countless Marines. "I've trained hundreds of snipers, some of whom went on to become legends in their own right. I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you." Sarah waited, unsure where the conversation was heading. "You have the best natural shooting ability I've seen in the last decade," Thompson continued. "But more than that, you have something that can't be taught, the mental discipline to perform under pressure while maintaining absolute precision. That combination is rare, and when it appears, it usually produces extraordinary results." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "I'm recommending you for advanced placement in the next phase of training. We're going to push you beyond the normal curriculum and see just how far your abilities can take you." The recommendation was unprecedented. No student in recent memory had been selected for advanced placement while still in the middle of the standard program. Sarah felt a mixture of pride and apprehension as she realized the increased expectations this would bring. Over the following weeks, Sarah's training intensified dramatically. While her classmates continued with the regular curriculum, she worked with Thompson and a select group of instructors on scenarios that pushed the boundaries of conventional marksmanship. They explored shooting at distances approaching 2,000 yards, where the bullet's flight time exceeded 2 seconds, and environmental factors became increasingly complex. Her progress continued to astound her instructors. She demonstrated an intuitive understanding of ballistics that typically took years to develop, combined with a shooting technique that remained consistent even under extreme stress. More importantly, she showed the tactical thinking and decision-making ability that distinguished combat-effective snipers from range shooters. The other students watched her advanced training with a mixture of respect and resentment. Some, like Jenkins, continued to harbor doubts about her abilities despite the mounting evidence. Others began to recognize that they were witnessing something exceptional and try to learn from observing her technique and approach. As the regular training program neared its conclusion, Sarah had established herself as not just the top performer in her class, but as someone whose abilities exceeded the normal parameters of the program. Her instructors began discussing possibilities that went far beyond standard sniper deployment, considering how her unique combination of skills might be utilized in specialized roles. The stage was being set for challenges that would test the absolute limits of her abilities. Unknown to Sarah, her exceptional performance had attracted attention from the highest levels of military command. Plans were already being formulated that would place her in situations where conventional limits would prove inadequate, and where her extraordinary skills would be tested under the most demanding conditions imaginable. 6 months after graduating at the top of her sniper class, Sarah found herself in Afghanistan, attached to a special operations unit conducting precision missions in the mountainous terrain near the Pakistani border. The landscape was brutal, jagged peaks rising above 12,000 feet, with valleys that seemed to stretch endlessly into hostile territory. Her reputation had preceded her to the combat zone. Word traveled fast in the close-knit community of military snipers, and stories about the female Marine who had shattered records at the school had reached every major unit. Some welcomed her expertise. Others remained skeptical about whether training ground performance would translate to combat effectiveness. Captain Williams, the unit commander, was pragmatic about Sarah's assignment to his team. He had seen too many promising soldiers fail under the stress of actual combat to place complete faith in training records, no matter how impressive. However, he also understood that his mission requirements were pushing the limits of conventional capability, and he needed every advantage available. The unit's current assignment was particularly challenging. Intelligence sources had identified a high-value target operating from a compound deep in enemy territory. The target was a senior bomb maker whose devices had killed dozens of coalition forces over the previous months. Multiple attempts to neutralize him through conventional means had failed, and his location made airstrikes impossible due to the risk of civilian casualties. The compound sat on a steep mountainside, surrounded by natural barriers that made ground assault extremely dangerous. The only viable approach was through a narrow valley that could be easily defended by a small force. Reconnaissance had identified a single position for which a precision shot might be possible, but the distance was extraordinary, over 3,800 yards across a deep canyon where wind conditions were notoriously unpredictable. Williams gathered his senior team members to discuss the mission parameters. The briefing room was filled with seasoned special operations veterans, men who had seen combat in multiple theaters and understood the complexities of precision operations in hostile territory. "Gentlemen, and Marine Martinez," Williams began, acknowledging Sarah's presence with a slight nod. "This target has been designated Priority 1 by Theater Command. Traditional approaches have failed, and we're running out of options." He activated a large display showing satellite imagery of the target area. The compound was clearly visible, but the scale of the terrain was intimidating. The shooting position would be located on a ridge nearly 4 kilometers away, with the target area barely visible even through high-powered optics. Gunnery Sergeant Davidson, the unit's most experienced sniper, studied the imagery with obvious concern. "Sir, that's an extremely challenging shot under the best conditions. With the altitude, the wind patterns in that valley, and the distance involved, we're looking at variables that push beyond standard engagement parameters." Sarah examined the terrain data carefully. Her training had prepared her for extreme long-range scenarios, but this assignment exceeded anything she had encountered even in the most advanced exercises. The ballistic calculations alone would be extraordinarily complex, requiring her to account for factors that most snipers never encountered. The target compound was situated at an elevation nearly 2,000 feet lower than the proposed shooting position. This meant the bullet would follow a trajectory that involved significant gravitational drop, complicated by the thin air at high altitude and the unpredictable wind currents that flowed through the mountain passes. Williams continued the briefing, outlining the intelligence gathering and reconnaissance phases that would precede any shooting attempt. The team would need to infiltrate close enough to the target area to conduct detailed observation and collect the meteorological data necessary for accurate shooting solutions. "The window for this operation is narrow," he explained. "Intelligence indicates the target will be at this location for no more than 72 hours. We'll have a single opportunity to execute this mission successfully." Over the following days, the team conducted intensive preparation for the operation. Sarah worked closely with the unit's intelligence specialists to understand every aspect of the target area. She studied satellite imagery, weather patterns, historical wind data, and topographical maps until she could visualize the terrain in complete detail. The ballistic calculations were staggering in their complexity. At the projected distance, her bullet would remain in flight for nearly 6 seconds, during which it would be affected by gravity, wind resistance, barometric pressure, temperature variations, and even the Coriolis effect caused by the Earth's rotation. Any miscalculation in these factors could result in a miss measured in yards rather than inches. Sarah spent hours working with the unit's technical specialists to develop firing solutions that accounted for every known variable. They used advanced ballistic software and meteorological modeling to create multiple scenarios based on different weather conditions and wind patterns. The margin for error was essentially zero. The infiltration phase began under cover of darkness. The team moved through hostile territory using specialized equipment and tactics designed to avoid detection by enemy forces known to be operating in the area. Sarah carried a custom rifle system specifically configured for the extreme range requirements of the mission, along with ammunition that had been hand-selected for consistency and accuracy. The journey to the shooting position took nearly 18 hours of movement through some of the most challenging terrain imaginable. The team navigated steep mountain passes, crossed frozen streams, and avoided known enemy patrol routes while carrying the heavy equipment necessary for the mission. When they finally reached the designated shooting position, Sarah was struck by the enormity of the challenge before her. The target area was barely visible through her scope, appearing as little more than a cluster of small buildings on a distant mountainside. The distance was so great that she could see the curvature of the bullet's trajectory through her optics. The team established a concealed observation post and began the meticulous process of collecting real-time environmental data. Wind speed and direction were measured at multiple points along the projected bullet path using specialized equipment. Temperature and humidity readings were taken continuously to track changes that could affect bullet performance. Davidson, despite his initial skepticism, found himself impressed by Sarah's methodical approach to the challenge. She didn't simply rely on technological solutions. Instead, she combined advanced ballistic calculations with intuitive understanding of how environmental factors would interact over the extreme distance involved. As the team settled into their observation routine, Sarah began the mental preparation that would be crucial for mission success. She visualized the shot repeatedly, mentally rehearsing every aspect of the firing sequence from target acquisition through follow-through. The pressure was enormous. Failure would likely mean the loss of an irreplaceable intelligence opportunity and the continued threat posed by one of the region's most dangerous bomb makers. The waiting began, with the team monitoring intelligence reports for confirmation that the target had arrived at the compound. Sarah used this time to continue refining her firing solutions and making minute adjustments based on changing environmental conditions. Every factor had to be perfect. There would be no opportunity for a second shot. Unknown to the team, their mission had attracted attention from the highest levels of military command. Senior officers were monitoring the operation's progress, aware that they were attempting something that pushed the absolute boundaries of what was considered possible in precision marksmanship. The success or failure of this mission would have implications far beyond the immediate tactical objective. The confirmation came at 0347 hours on the second day of observation. Intelligence sources reported that the target had arrived at the compound and was expected to remain there for approximately 8 hours before moving to another location. Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly as the reality of the situation settled in. This was it. Captain Williams gathered the team for a final briefing. The weather conditions were as favorable as they could hope for, with relatively stable wind patterns and clear visibility across the canyon. The meteorological data they had collected over the past 36 hours had been fed into multiple ballistic calculation systems, all producing remarkably consistent firing solutions. "Martinez, you've got one shot," Williams stated simply. "The target will likely be visible for only a few minutes at a time, and we can't risk multiple attempts without compromising our position." Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility resting on her shoulders. She had spent months training for scenarios like this, but the reality of attempting a shot at over 4,000 yards in actual combat conditions was unlike anything she had experienced. The rifle system she would be using was a masterpiece of precision engineering. The custom barrel had been manufactured to tolerances measured in fractions of thousandths of an inch, and the ammunition had been selected from batches that demonstrated exceptional consistency. The scope was a technological marvel that could resolve details at distances that seemed impossible. As dawn broke over the mountains, Sarah settled into her shooting position. The bipod legs were adjusted to provide perfect stability on the rocky surface, and sandbags were positioned to eliminate any possibility of movement during the shooting sequence. Every detail had to be perfect. There was no room for error at this distance. Through her scope, the target compound appeared as a collection of small brown rectangles against the mountainside. The magnification was so high that atmospheric distortion created a slight shimmer effect, making precise target identification challenging. Sarah had studied photographs of the target individual until she could recognize him from the smallest details. At 0623 hours, movement was detected in the compound. Sarah tracked the figures through her scope, waiting for positive identification of the target. The distance was so great that even with maximum magnification, the people appeared as tiny figures moving between the buildings. "I have movement in the courtyard," Sarah reported quietly into her radio. "Multiple individuals, but no positive identification yet." Davidson, observing through a high-powered spotting scope, confirmed the activity. "I count 4 individuals. Still waiting for target identification." The minutes passed with agonizing slowness. Sarah maintained her position, fighting the natural tendency for muscle tension that could affect shooting accuracy. At this distance, even the slightest movement would translate into a miss measured in feet rather than inches. At 0637 hours, the target appeared. Intelligence photographs had shown him to be a tall, thin man with distinctive clothing and mannerisms. Through the scope, Sarah could barely make out these identifying features, but the match was positive enough to proceed. Target identified, she reported. Individual matching description in the eastern courtyard. Williams made the final decision. You are cleared to engage. Sarah's training took over as she began the final sequence that would culminate in the shot. Her breathing slowed and deepened as she prepared to fire during the natural respiratory pause that would provide maximum stability. Her heart rate, which had elevated during the target identification phase, gradually returned to normal. The ballistic calculation was staggering in its complexity. The bullet would need to travel 4,020 yards through air that varied in density, temperature, and humidity. The trajectory would arc high above the canyon floor before descending toward the target. Wind conditions had been measured at multiple points along the flight path, but Sarah knew that conditions could change during the 6-second flight time. She made minute adjustments to her scope settings, accounting for the temperature differential that had developed as the sun warmed the air in the canyon. The calculations suggested the bullet would drop nearly 90 feet during its flight, requiring her to aim at a point that seemed impossibly high above the actual target. Davidson provided final wind readings and confirmed target location. Wind is steady at 7 knots from the northwest. Target remains in position in the eastern courtyard. Sarah settled into her final shooting position. The crosshairs of her scope were aligned on a point in empty air high above the target compound. To any observer, it would appear she was aiming at nothing but sky, but the ballistic calculations demanded this seemingly impossible sight picture. Her finger settled on the trigger with a light touch that had been drilled into her through thousands of practice rounds. The trigger pressure increased gradually, smoothly, until the firing pin released with the sharp crack that seemed to echo across the mountains. The bullet's flight time seemed eternal. Sarah maintained her position, tracking through the scope to observe the impact. At this distance, she would see the bullet strike before the sound reached the target area. The silence stretched endlessly as the projectile followed its calculated arc across the canyon. After what felt like hours, but was actually 5.8 seconds, Sarah saw a small puff of dust appear near the target area. Through the high magnification of her scope, she could see that the target had collapsed. The shot had found its mark across a distance that pushed the absolute boundaries of what was considered possible. Target down, she reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Davidson confirmed the hit through his spotting scope. Impact confirmed. Target neutralized. The team maintained observation for several more minutes to confirm the results and ensure their position remained uncompromised. Activity in the compound increased dramatically as other individuals responded to the situation, but Sarah had already begun the process of carefully packing her equipment for immediate extraction. Williams coordinated the withdrawal with the precision that characterized special operations. The team needed to evacuate the area quickly before enemy forces could respond to the shot. The sound of the rifle would carry for miles in the thin mountain air, potentially alerting hostile forces to their general location. As they began their movement toward the extraction point, Sarah reflected on what had just transpired. She had successfully engaged a target at 4,020 yards, a distance that exceeded the established records for precision shooting under combat conditions. The shot represented the culmination of years of training, months of preparation, and a lifetime of dedication to the art of marksmanship. The extraction proceeded without incident, but Sarah knew that the implications of her achievement would extend far beyond the immediate tactical success. Word of the shot would spread throughout the military community, forever changing perceptions about the limits of precision marksmanship and demonstrating that exceptional ability could emerge from the most unexpected sources. The mission report would eventually make its way through various levels of command, documenting not only the successful elimination of a high-value target, but also a shooting achievement that redefined what was considered possible in military marksmanship. For Sarah, it represented vindication of every skeptical comment, every doubted ability, and every questioned decision that had brought her to this moment on a remote mountainside in Afghanistan. News of the 4,020-yard shot spread through military channels with unprecedented speed. Within hours of the mission debrief, senior commanders throughout the theater were requesting details about the engagement. By the end of the week, the achievement had reached the Pentagon, where analysts struggled to verify and understand the implications of what Sarah had accomplished. The official documentation process was exhaustive. Ballistics experts examined every aspect of the shot, from the environmental conditions to the ammunition specifications. Multiple independent calculations confirmed that the engagement had indeed exceeded 4,000 yards, making it one of the longest confirmed sniper kills in military history. More importantly, the circumstances surrounding the shot demonstrated tactical application that went far beyond mere record-setting. Sarah found herself summoned to a series of debriefings with increasingly senior officers. Each session involved detailed analysis of her techniques, training background, and decision-making process during the mission. The military's interest went beyond simple curiosity. They wanted to understand how such exceptional capability had developed and whether it could be replicated in other personnel. Colonel Patterson, the senior intelligence officer conducting the primary debrief, was particularly interested in Sarah's unconventional background. Marie Martinez, your training records show exceptional performance, but this level of capability typically takes decades to develop. Help me understand the factors that contributed to your success. Sarah explained her childhood experiences on her grandfather's ranch, the mathematical foundation that helped her understand ballistics, and the intensive training she had received from Master Gunnery Sergeant Thompson. However, she also acknowledged that something indefinable had contributed to her abilities, an intuitive understanding of how environmental factors interacted at extreme distances. Sir, I think it comes down to treating each shot as a complex problem with multiple variables rather than simply aiming and firing, she explained. The calculations provide the foundation, but successful shooting at these distances requires understanding how all the factors work together in real-world conditions. Patterson nodded thoughtfully. The military was always interested in understanding exceptional performance, particularly when it suggested new possibilities for tactical application. Sarah's achievement had demonstrated that precision engagements could be conducted at distances previously thought impossible, potentially revolutionizing certain types of operations. Meanwhile, word of the shot had reached the broader military community through informal channels. The response was mixed but intense. Many veteran snipers expressed amazement at the technical achievement and began reassessing their own assumptions about maximum effective range. Others questioned the documentation or suggested that favorable conditions had made an otherwise impossible shot feasible. Corporal Jenkins, now serving with a different unit, heard about the achievement through the military grapevine. His initial reaction was disbelief, followed by a grudging acknowledgement that he had fundamentally misjudged Sarah's capabilities. The female Marine he had dismissed as unqualified had achieved something that would cement her place in military history. Master Gunnery Sergeant Thompson received the news while training a new class of sniper candidates. His reaction was pride, mixed with satisfaction that his assessment of Sarah's potential had been vindicated so dramatically. He immediately incorporated analysis of the 4,020-yard shot into his curriculum, using it to illustrate advanced ballistic concepts and the importance of thorough preparation. This shot represents the pinnacle of precision marksmanship, he told his students during a ballistics lecture. It demonstrates what becomes possible when exceptional natural ability is combined with intensive training and absolute attention to detail. More importantly, it shows that assumptions about limitations can be overcome through superior preparation and execution. The achievement also attracted attention from civilian law enforcement and competitive shooting communities. The techniques and calculations involved in the shot offered insights that could benefit precision shooting in various applications. Sarah found herself fielding requests for interviews and technical discussions from experts across multiple disciplines. 6 months after the mission, Sarah was reassigned to a specialized role developing advanced marksmanship training programs. Her unique combination of exceptional shooting ability and combat experience made her invaluable for updating training methods and pushing the boundaries of what was considered achievable in military precision shooting. The new position allowed her to work directly with equipment manufacturers and ballistics experts to improve the tools available to military snipers. Her practical experience with extreme long-range shooting provided insights that purely theoretical approaches could never achieve. The collaboration led to improvements in rifle systems, ammunition design, and optical equipment that benefited the entire precision shooting community. Sarah also began working with psychological specialists to understand the mental aspects of extreme precision shooting. The 4,020-yard shot had required not only technical skill, but also the mental discipline to remain calm and focused under enormous pressure. This psychological dimension became a crucial component of advanced training programs. The impact of her achievement extended beyond immediate tactical applications. Military planners began considering operational concepts that had previously been dismissed as impossible. The ability to engage targets at distances approaching 5 kilometers opened new possibilities for specialized missions where conventional approaches were not feasible. During a training conference 2 years after the famous shot, Sarah was asked to address a gathering of senior military instructors and equipment specialists. Her presentation covered the technical aspects of extreme long-range shooting, but she focused particularly on the importance of preparation and the danger of accepting artificial limitations. The 4,020-yard shot was possible because we refused to accept that it was impossible, she told the audience. Every calculation suggested it could be done, and careful preparation made execution feasible. Too often, we limit ourselves based on conventional wisdom rather than objective analysis of what the technology and techniques actually allow. Her words resonated throughout the military training community. Instructors began pushing their students beyond traditional boundaries, exploring techniques and distances that had previously been considered impractical. The result was a new generation of precision shooters who approached their craft with expanded understanding of what was achievable. The achievement also had a profound impact on attitudes toward diversity and capability in specialized military roles. Sarah's success became a powerful example of how talent could emerge from unexpected backgrounds and how traditional assumptions about suitability for certain roles could be dangerously limiting. Years later, as Sarah transitioned to civilian life, the 4,020-yard shot remained a defining moment that had changed not only her own career, but the entire field of military precision shooting. The techniques developed for that single engagement have been refined and incorporated into standard training programs, extending the effective range of military snipers across all services. The skeptics who had questioned her abilities during training had long since been silenced by objective results. The shot stood as irrefutable proof that exceptional capability could not be predicted by conventional criteria, and that true expertise transcended assumptions about background, gender, or traditional qualifications. Sarah's legacy extended far beyond a single remarkable shot. She had demonstrated that the limits of human capability were often artificial constructs rather than absolute boundaries. Her achievement inspired a generation of precision shooters to push beyond conventional limitations and explore the true potential of advanced marksmanship techniques. The 4,020-yard shot became more than a military achievement. It became a symbol of what was possible when exceptional talent met proper preparation and unwavering determination. In military circles, it remained a benchmark that few would ever approach, but it also served as proof that even the most extraordinary achievements were within reach of those willing to dedicate themselves completely to excellence.